Texas tatted on my arm, got Houston on my back, cause I love the city I'm from.
Texans Central Radio, hosted by Jay Anderson.
Catch me wrecking, belly faster than intersections. Cool name Foster cause you can't catch it. And it's like Jake do, better come prepared when we play you. We came to win, can't take a loss.
Hey fans, today on Texans Central Radio, we're going to be talking all things Texans. Tonight the Texans aren't playing, but guess what? We're still talking. And we're going to go over some things with our special guest tonight, Mike Tanier. We're going to be talking about everything from what does he think is going to go down with Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins to J.J. Swat and his salute. Is it excessive or is it just a tribute to the military? You'll find out tonight when we talk to Mike. Also, be on the lookout for all things Texans at Texans Central Radio.
Football fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central Radio Network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
So, without further ado, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. Soven. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Awesome. So can you just tell our fans just a little bit about you and also kind of give us a little breakdown on some of your fantasy projections?
All right. I'm Soven. I'm a senior analyst for Bleacher Report and NFL lead writer at Pro Football Central. And I also contribute to Rand Sports and Bloomberg Sports and have my own blog called The Locker Room. And so for some Texans fantasy projections, I think you have to start with Arian Foster, who has completely lit it up the past couple seasons and should continue to do that. So Andre Johnson is going to have a big year as he's had for the past couple years. He's one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL, and Matt Schaub is just getting better and better, so he should also have a big fantasy year.
Awesome. So you went over some of the veterans that you have amazing projections over, and of course, I agree. However, what do you think about some of the rookies and some of the free agents that have come onto the Texans? Where do you kind of see them fitting into this whole fantasy puzzle?
I think the rookie that you have to start with is DeAndre Hopkins. The Texans drafted him in the first round, and he has already been amazing at wide receiver in training camp. Gary Kubiak, the head coach, has said that he's been exceptional, and I think you should draft him in one of the later rounds and keep him as a backup on your fantasy team. And then also another big free agent acquisition the team had was Ed Reed, who is only going to make this defense better. And the Texans defense should be one of the best fantasy defenses in the NFL this year. They have J.J. Watt, Brian Cushing, who was injured last year. He's back, and they're going to have a great defense.
Okay. In your opinion, what do you think about Swearinger? Because he's also going to be alongside Ed Reed, so we really can't leave one out without speaking on the other.
Yeah, I think both of them are going to have big years, and he's also looked great in training camp. And I think they're only going to make the Texans defense even better. So definitely a huge fantasy player to look for in one of the later rounds.
Good deal. So just to ask you this, because I'm one of those people who I'm intrigued by fantasy football, but I will be honest, America, I totally suck at fantasy football because I thought it was supposed to be my fantasy, and my fantasy would be all the cute players, obviously. So what are some tips that you can give our listeners about how to, possibly pick a draft, coordinate their draft, and just some helpful tips to get them, to win their leagues this season?
I think the number one thing you should do is when you're drafting is to put your fan allegiance down the drain, because it's not going to help you to only draft Texans players, because there are obviously great players around the league, and you should always try to draft the best player available. As for if you have one of the top picks in the first round, the old age strategy is to draft a running back, and I think that's something that's incredibly important because wide receivers are always in flux, and there's great quarterbacks. You can get them in the 3rd, 4th round, but there's only a handful of good running backs, and those are going to be taken really, really quickly. So you definitely want to get your hands on a great runner, such as Arian Foster.
Awesome. And how many fantasy leagues do you kind of have that you keep up with during the season? How many do you do?
Oh, wow. I have to count. Let's see. I have them all favorited. So around 10 or 11 leagues.
Wow. And what was your record last season?
In my main league, I finished 5th, and do not know my record, but I finished 5th in that league. I made some questionable trades down the end, but I think I drafted overall well. There was a trade that did me in.
Okay. So, and how would fans be able to find you via Twitter or anywhere on social media? Because obviously you have the brain that we would like to pick to stay up on what we should do for fantasy football. I know I will. Or somebody needs to write me a handbook. How can we find you?
My Twitter handle is @RealSovenberry, SOVENBERY, or Real Sovenberry. There is a fake Twitter account there. Do not follow that one. So yeah, I'm on Twitter there, and yeah, that's I think the best social media place to reach out to me. You can tweet me or DM me or anything for any fancy advice any of y'all need.
Well, the good thing is if you have a fake Twitter account out there about you, that means that you're doing something right. So that definitely definitely means we need to make sure we follow you for all of our fantasy football questions, and definitely also look for you on Bleacher Report and some of any. Do you have any other fantasy football projects coming up that you want to let us know about?
Fantasy football wise, no, I don't have any fantasy football projects. I'm going to be writing as a lead writer for Pro Football Central in the fall, as well as Bleacher Report and Rand Sports, contributing to Bloomberg Sports and Yahoo. So you can find me lots of places on the web.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining in on us, and I look forward to speaking to you later on in the season and definitely following you on Twitter so I can finally learn how to overcome my whole fantasy football fumble.
All right. Thank you so much.
Cigar fans, check out fifthdowncigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice high-end cigars. That's fifthdowncigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
Hi, fans. We're on and we're back. Like I told you, we'll be talking all things Texans tonight from Arian Foster quitting Twitter again to Andre Johnson not making the preseason trip up to Minnesota. But we're going to be joined by a legend in the making, Mr. Mike Tanier, who is a writer for SportsOnEarth and a multitude of other online publications. So without further ado, hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's wonderful to be talking about football, or what Arian Foster calls it, the break in his acting career.
That would be a perfect description of him right about now.
I don't want to suggest. I just looking for making sure I was up to date on my Texans news. I actually had to go on the Internet Movie Database to keep track of all Foster's comings and goings on Hawaii 5-0 and in the draft movie that's coming up. But I'm not suggesting for a second that he's not ready to play. I'm just saying it's funny how someone goes from a guy nobody heard of to somebody who has a long listing on the Internet Movie Database.
You know, I think most people share the same opinion you do. How did you go from virtually unknown to, it's one of those that kind of raises a lot of questions. You want to just say, just play football.
Are you concerned? Is that a legitimate concern that his focus is not on football?
You know what? With Arian, he's a tough one. He's a tough cookie. And that aspect is he's an amazing athlete when he's on the field. But personality-wise, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You have all the pieces there in front of you, but you really can't put them together. They just don't really fit, but you know that they're there. That's kind of how I look at Arian Foster. So please package this and figure out how to put these together.
He's a very bright guy, and he's a guy with a lot of different interests. And there are a lot of bright guys in the NFL, but a lot of them are just interested in football and some basic things. And he's got some different interests out there. When you talk to him, you might be all over the place talking about movies and dining and things like that. And sometimes that you look at that and you're surprised, and some people misinterpret that as saying he doesn't care enough about football. I don't think that's the case at all. I just think he's got somebody who maybe has a little bit more on his mind and a little more to talk about. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, and I totally agree. I definitely think it's a very intriguing thing. I love the fact that he has so many interests, and I think for fans, I think they have to understand that it's okay to have other interests and not just be, I've met many accountants, and not every accountant I know just focuses on numbers for their entire lives and their entire careers. You have to have those other outside interests. So I definitely applaud him for having those. However, I think that it's just his personality and his approach to some of his outside interests kind of throws fans off.
But yeah, I hear you, and I hear what you're saying as well. I think some people think that the guy should be lifting weights every waking moment, from the time the playoffs end until today and tomorrow. And again, your accountant doesn't do that, your doctor doesn't do that, and your running back is not going to do that either.
Andre Johnson and a couple of other veterans are making a trip up to Minnesota this week. Of course, you want to give Andre as much rest as you possibly can and save him for, when the season finally does roll around and getting closer to that. And also, they are playing on the turf in Minnesota, which isn't the best thing for Andre's legs. But on some of the other vets who aren't making this trip up to Minnesota, what's your take on that?
Can you go over what veterans are not going up? Because I don't have that in front of me right now.
On the veterans who are making the trip up to Minnesota. Because there's some veterans who are...
Who's not making the trip?
I believe all veterans, I don't think, there's about 4. I know Aaron Foster he's going to be in, I think they say Clear says maybe 10 plays. But you have Andre who's not going to make the trip at all, and about 4 or 5 others who have maybe minor injuries. I can't think of every name off the top of my head, but there's about maybe 3 or 4 others who won't be for minor things that normally you wouldn't see, but he wants to save them for later on. Do you think with the way that the CBA is set up these days, with the way that the preseason is 4 games now, do you like resting players, or would you rather these first 2 easy games have them kind of go ahead and play a little bit and let them pick when it comes closer toward the end of the preseason?
Well, I'll tell you what, especially for a team like the Texans, I don't need to see that much out of the veterans. I don't concern myself with Matt Schaub, Andre Johnson, big players like that, being sharp. If they get out there in the 3rd preseason game and play, a half, or the next preseason game and play a quarter, they're going to be sharp. So much of this team's need to improve comes down to so many of these younger players and some of these unknown players who will get more opportunities. I think a lot of people on the offensive line need to see some of the younger guys. We do not need to see Myers. We do not need to see Brown to know that they're ready. We need to see some of the other players. At wide receiver, certainly, that's probably the most critical position across from Andre Johnson. And to get Hopkins out there and have him be the number 1, I think it might be the best possible thing. Yeah, let's see what happens if he's being covered by number 1 cornerbacks and get a look at him under those circumstances. Some of the depth wide receivers, guys who might be called upon to be the 4th or 5th guy. You want to see that. You want to see Merciless and get out there in a situation where he might be the guy getting double teamed. So you want to see all those things. I would not be concerned. I would not expect to see more than a 10-play series from most of the veterans at the beginning of the season. And I think it's different when you're not talking about a playoff team. If I'm seeing a team in full rebuilding mode, I want to see everything. The Texans are in a different situation. They're not trying to prove that they can be a 9-7, 10-6, 11-5 team with Schaub and Johnson. They need to look at the guys who could take them into that next step, and that's those unknown players.
So do you see the Texans taking that next step? And, of course, they're 29-17 anymore. But do you see something a little close to what they did last year, or do you see them improving from where they were last year?
Well, everything points to, and as I work for Football Outsiders, we do a lot of statistical projections. And the statistical projections kind of start the Texans as a 10-11-win team or a 12-win team in that range, just as they were last year, just as they were the year before. There's no evidence or suggestion that this is a team that will fall off. They've got the core nucleus of talent. They've got guys like Watt who are on the rise, and they're in a division where some wins are going to be easier than they would be in some other divisions. The hardest thing in the NFL is not getting from 5-11 to 11-5. The hardest thing is getting from 11-5 to getting to that place where the Patriots live, and getting to that place where a Peyton Manning team generally lives. And so many little things have to come into place that's hard to project. I think Hopkins was a big upgrade because wide receiver was a problem, but it wasn't just the number 2 wide receiver position. They need to get production out of sections 2 through 4. Is Jean the guy there? Is a guy like Martin the guy there? We saw so little from Martin last year, I don't know. They have a lot to prove in terms of the kicking game. And I think Leckler is a good acquisition there. But they need to show that they can cover their kicks, obviously a problem, and return the kicks effectively. Those are things that it's hard to look at and make a big projection. It's not a free agent signing. It's not a splash. And it's tiny little improvements. And so many of those have to break right for this team. The thing that they have going for them isn't just that they got Hopkins and that they're getting better, but some of the teams that they have to beat are getting worse. Obviously, Patriots had a difficult offseason. Ravens lost a lot of people. And the Broncos are getting hit with injuries right now. And, the Texans are a team that can improve by staying healthy and staying where they are if those other historic rivals of theirs are having these kind of problems.
So do you see so statistically, and I totally agree, I said this means that I realistically see the Texans going 11-5 this season. Mm-hmm. However, because the Texans, looking at what they have going on and looking at their particular roster that they have all the pieces of the puzzle that are there. But I think the key for them is going to be in the details. And I will repeat this until I'm blue in the face. Do you think that there are any specific key pieces that the Texans can focus on that will not only get them, to improve from being just an 11-5 team, but also that will propel them into the playoffs to go a little bit deeper? Because again, like you said, the Ravens are not the same Ravens from last year. The Broncos are not going to be the same Broncos from last year. So are there any key pieces that stand out to you that the Texans focus on to get them over those humps?
One is special teams that's very correctable, and that can turn a game or two around, create more home field advantages, and put you in this position where you're not having big plays go against you. I've been harping for this team for team speed for the past year or so. I mean, I saw them last year, and they don't have that sort of electrifying speed, running guys down from behind on big plays on defense. They don't have just like pure burners in the secondary. I think in the last year or two they got better at that through the draft. Another issue, and it's something that has been a problem for this team for a couple of years, they're designed to get the lead and play with the lead. And I was looking at the stat breakdowns again today, and it's not just the fact that they are a running and play-action team, but they're a team that excels defensively when they're in their dime package and when they're pass rushing. They want to have a 10-point lead, run the ball down your throat, and go into their dime package and let their pass rushing defensive backs beat you. When they are trailing, the Texans remain a whole different team. Their base defense is not very strong. Their base 3-4 is not exceptional. Their passing game, when they spread the field and go to that third wideout, is not very good. They have to say, we need another plan besides, we can take a big lead, and in the regular season, we can roll up on the Ravens. They got to say, well, what happens when we're down 10, 14, 17 points? They aren't really built for that, and I think they've taken some steps. I mean, Cushing coming back helps part of that. Merciless taking a step forward, Reed developing. There's a lot of things that could improve that, but they need a plan for, oh my God, we're down by 10 to the Patriots. Last year the plan was, I think, to go down by 17 to the Patriots. That part of that is on Schaub himself. Part of that's on the receiving corps stepping up. Part of that's on the coaching staff, and I think part of that is getting the pieces that they need, guys like Cushing, healthy again.
So could you say that could be a result of, and I've heard this said plenty of times in the course of being a Texans fan and being with the team as well, could you say that they lack a mental toughness? Because when you talk about, okay, yes, you get down by 10, 17, 21, 24 points, we've seen teams come back from things like that. The Texans historically have not come back from being down points-wise from that. It almost becomes, they almost go into a panic when we see that. Do you think that it could be something that could be attributed to a lack of mental toughness, not only from Shaw, but also to the coaching staff, and not being able to get them to regroup and come back from being down?
You can say it's mental toughness. I hate going to the mental aspect when it looks like there's physical things. And when I look at an offense that is passing game is designed around the play-action pass, that's not a good design for when you're down by 10, 17, where teams are no longer worried about Foster and Tate and they can say they can go back. I think you reach to Matt Schaub's limitations when you say you've got to throw the ball downfield with no play action. And that's also part of what's built in a weakness to the Kubiak system. They're not designed for that. And then you go on the defensive end, and I'm not sure, you say, are they hard-nosed or whatever. when you had Cushing out last year, when you lost Lyons, when you lost some of those guys, you had a defense that was not necessarily built to keep stopping the run on a consistent basis, and that can come up to haunt you when you're trying to play from behind. So you had all those pieces in place, and toughness could be a part of that. But I would say having more of a plan B. When Kubiak goes to his plan B, and it's like now we have to spread the field and go with multi-wide receivers, there were no multi-wide receivers. There was nobody beyond Johnson and Walter was fading. So you had them down 10 points, 17 points, and you had Casey, and you had tight ends on the field catching 86-yard passes. These guys aren't playmakers. So that goes up and down the organization, where it's the acquisition of the players, it's the style of play, and then it does go down to the players themselves and their ability to execute in those situations. And that's a serious question that I don't know what the answer to is. Hopkins obviously gives them a more dynamic receiving core, and I would figure that has to be a start at this point.
Okay. So it's like this, we can start throwing out this whole mental toughness excuse, and kind of piggyback on something, one of Gary Kubiak's famous quotes is, I didn't have them prepared. And sometimes, like you said, they were not built to stop the run last season. They weren't built for certain things last season, and they're having to overcome those humps. However, not to just focus on what the Texans didn't do or what the Texans haven't been doing, focus on things that they have been doing well and seeing them improve year over year. I'm loving what Phillips is doing. Heavyweight Phillips is with the Texans now. And the things that they are doing well, what stands out for you?
Oh, the things that they still do significantly well is run that zone stretch kind of offense. They had trouble on the offensive line last year. It wasn't as good as it was. They had some trouble on the right side, which I'm not sure was corrected. But, when they're setting up the play where they're running zone stretch over and over again, then running play action off of that, that is a deadly effective system. That is a system that Mike Shanahan won Broncos Super Bowls with. That is going incredibly well. The rise of Watt and the creativity on defense that Phillips has been bringing has been exceptional. I like what I've seen from the secondary. Bringing in Ed Reed, he brought in, it looks like he's damaged goods, obviously older goods. That speaks to the mental toughness. That speaks to the leadership and all of those things. But I didn't see them as a big problem point last year. Kareem Jackson was playing well. Joseph had an off year, but I think he could bounce back. Manning's a good player. So much that they've done well is in the trenches, in the nuts and bolts, and creating these systems that, when they work, are exceptional at what they do. And, there are a lot of teams that are killing for the opportunity to go back-to-back, have playoff wins in back-to-back seasons, that try to do the opposite and be like, well, we're going to spread the field and be a 5-wide receiver team, and it's a mess. And that's not what you get. You have a very organized system. And unfortunately for Texans fans, they've seen kind of the glass ceiling of that system, just hammer them twice in the playoffs in the second round right there. And that's where the difficulty lies. You create something that really, really does work, and now you have to build around the edges of that. And that's the task that Smith and Kubiak and the whole group have to do, is build around those edges. And they have to do it with a veteran team, and I think with some salary cap issues that are a little tight.
Awesome. You just have schooled us. You have definitely schooled us tonight on the Texans and made me so excited about tomorrow. And I can't believe it's been this long since we went without a Texans game. And we've had so much time to analyze everything that they've been doing and seeing everything that they've been on come to fruition. I'm so excited about tomorrow. I feel like a kid on Christmas. I hear that you're an Eagles fan. That's what a birdie told me. Now, seeing that you're an Eagles fan, is that true?
That is true. I grew up an Eagles fan. Of course, I try to be impartial now, but I still live just a few miles from Lincoln Financial Field, and I spent a couple days this week over there watching the Eagles-Patriots practice.
Awesome. So let me ask you this, because even though it's off topic for my Texans, but I'm interested in hearing what your take is on the Eagles this season, because you have Nick Foles and you have Michael Vick, and then you have a coach like Chip Kelly. How do you see them coming up with? Do you think they'll have one system, or are they going to have two systems since they have two quarterbacks that are so different? And Chip Kelly saying he wants to give reps to both quarterbacks.
I think you're going to have one system, and Kelly's system has, like, the part that he does when the quarterback can run a lot and the part that he does when the quarterback can only run a little. Because I believe it was 2010 when he did not have a running quarterback in Oregon, and he had to scale back that element. There's things that you can do right within his system where the quarterback is only going to take off 1 or 2 or 3 times a game, and he's only going to be expected to gain 5 or 6 yards. And I think you're going to see that system. The question is how effective it will be and how effective it will be in the short term. And right now, the quarterback situation's in flux. It was funny watching Vic and Foles on the same field as Tom Brady because you can see the distance between exceptional quarterback and, formerly super talented quarterback who's fallen on harder times, and then the young guy who's only so talented. And you can see that gap. And that's the gap the Eagles have in a lot of places on their roster. This team that was a playoff caliber roster through about 2010, even 2011, is no longer that. They've lost so many guys, some to injuries, a lot to free agency, a lot to just a rebuild. And this is a rebuilding team up and down. So if we were talking about Chip Kelly coming in and getting a all-star team's worth of talent and running his read option, we'd probably be seeing something exceptional. What we're going to see is interesting. And I think what we're going to see is unique and different. But we're going to see a team struggling to find itself. And Kelly simultaneously trying to put a system in place and trying to put a bunch of players in place because he does not have those pieces at this point.
Right. So with that being said, the Eagles, of course, this offseason have been kind of the talk of the town. Surprisingly, I did not expect or anticipate the Eagles having such controversy around their season this offseason. So definitely the whole Riley Cooper thing has definitely had a lot of people having dialect. For some people, definitely has been a healthy dialect on and off the field. What's your take on the whole Riley situation?
You know what I was there when he came back onto the field, and there was all this speculation that he was going to be spirited by opponents or things like that, and nothing like that happened. And when we talk about healthy discussion, healthy dialogue, I think that happened in the locker rooms. I think that's happening among the players. And it's not always happening in the media. It's not always happening in Facebook where it's healthy, where you see these kind of conversations that are anger and people in camps. It's not happening necessarily on ESPN where guys want to make a name for themselves and they become very exaggerated or they become very contrary. What these players have done is they've taken a racially charged situation, and they in the locker room have had conversations that were meaningful and positive. And guys on the Eagles and African-American players like Vic and D'Amico Ryans and Jason Avant, the leaders of this team, opened this up and had a conversation that I think was valuable. And these guys are being responsible and these guys are being professional. Whatever happens moving forward, they're trying to do what's best in terms of having a job to do and having the basic attitude of forgiveness that I think we were all raised to have. And that is the most positive thing that I've seen. All the craziness that I've heard, that I've seen on Facebook, that I've seen on Twitter, in the national conversation, these guys have been as stand-up as possible. And when you look at a guy like Mike Vick, who had a trouble pass, to come out and be, a leader and to be mature and to be on both sides of this, to make Riley Cooper accountable for what he said, but at the same time not turn this into a big drama. That's something that I think is encouraging. That these dudes in their 20s who are supposed to be, like these angry, violent dudes, these are the ones who are showing the way of how to respond, and I guess the most mature and most professional way they could.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to be wrapping things up, Mike. And can you let our listeners know where can they find you? Because you write for some amazing publications online. Where can they find some of your work?
Now I can plug myself. Great. You can find me on SportsOnEarth.com. SportsOnEarth.com has all sports coverage. You can find me and writers like Gwen Knapp, Lil Leach, Sean Powell, Chuck Culpepper, a lot of writers from around the Internet and around the world of newspapers. Also write for the Football Outsiders Almanac, which is available at Amazon.com and the FootballOutsiders.com site. And that's lots of stats, lots of previews. That's where you're going to get your stat breakdown and your scouting breakdown of the Texans and everybody else. A little bit less on the talk about toughness and talk about the Patriots way and crazy things like that. Finally, you can find me on Twitter at Mike Tanier. That's at Mike, Tanier. and I'll be tweeting a lot. And you'll be seeing me tweeting from the Eagles-Patriots game tomorrow.
Football fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central radio network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
Hey, y'all. It's been a shaky start to our first night here at Texans Central Radio, but you stuck with me, and we made it through. And now it's time for my two-point conversion. For this two-point conversion, I'd like to say not only thank you, but also to let people know about a very special Houston radio personality who's very near and dear to my heart, Mr. Barry Warner. It was announced earlier this week that Barry Warner is going to be leaving Sports 610. And possibly one of my biggest sports memories of being a Houston Texans fan was meeting Barry Warner. He's a living legend in the area. And if you know anything about football, about hockey, or just about being an all-around great person, then you have to know Barry Warner. He's definitely a legend, and I definitely wish him well in all of his endeavors. And I know that he's going to be listening to Texans Central Radio this season. Also, getting ready for our Texans to start their preseason tomorrow. They'll be playing the Minnesota Vikings, so definitely set your DVR, get in front of whatever you need to do, radio, get there, be on time, and make sure that you're listening and or watching as the home team goes up to Minnesota to kick off their season. Now, we won't be seeing a lot of the veterans tomorrow night. However, be on the lookout for a lot of their new faces. A lot of the rookies that you've been watching in camp, and you can stand out there in the hot Houston Texans sun looking at all summer long. So definitely be on the lookout for those things. Also, be on the lookout for Texans Central Radio next week and every week after that via ProFootballCentral.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. And guess what? We're only going to get better as the season goes on. Have a great day.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.